Okay, to be serious, I wasn't sure if I'd answered you sufficiently. I thought it might have to do with the removed video. You've told me what that was about, and you're still asking this question. But why am I pushing this point if not to say that the free will? Well, okay, you know what? I suspect that free will does have something to do with quantum physics, but it's only because we have no other candidates. So if we learn new kinds of like the physics of dark matter or something, and maybe it's not unified with quantum physics, I'm open to that as well because I know how much we don't know. But this argument is not saying that. This argument is saying that people that argue against free will by physics don't have a leg to stand on. Physics has moved on. There is no determinacy. There's only the appearance of determinacy due to the laws of statistics, period. That's why scientists have error bars. You can think it through 1,000 different ways, and you will see eventually what I'm talking about. Okay, the Newtonian laws of mechanics are only true because the relative velocities are low, because in terms of general relativity, but in terms of quantum mechanics, because of the law of statistics, because we at the macroscopic level are working with probabilistic distributions, which are like determinate, right? But they're not determinate because the events don't actually exactly match them, and it doesn't determine how they'll be. It just gives a guess as to what the pattern's going to look like, the general shape of it. Okay, so that's all I'm saying is that argument from mechanical determinacy no longer holds absolutely. Now people can still say, oh, but we are mechanical, so fine, demonstrate we're a Turing machine. Whatever, but just don't say that it has to be because everything is mechanistic in that sense, because that's not what science says anymore. If you want to say that, you don't get to use science, you have to use something else. It can even call itself science, but it's not going to be this Western history, this tradition of what we know of as physics. So it does obviously relate because you have people saying there is no free will and here's why, and I'm going, well, that can't be why. So it does relate. That's just A leading to B. It does relate. People are using this to attack free will. Now, as far as the word free, I've said this 100 times. People just kind of black it out or something. But, I don't believe in unrestrained freedom. It's just like free speech. I can't say something in French because I don't know French. There's always constraints on any freedom. It's not about a total freedom. And Mendam can say, oh, I'm changing the meaning of the word. But, really this is how people talk, more and less free. Right? People do talk about that. Free speech doesn't mean you could say anything. Doesn't mean I could speak in French or say something that's dangerous. Fire in the crowded theater. My argument for the will, it comes from a much more naturalistic thing. I experience the will. I don't have to look in quantum physics and say, oh, you know what? I see something in quantum physics, looks like it's a phenomenon. Let's call it will. No, I experience will every time I make a decision. Now, is it free or not, or how free is it? That's an open question. I'll talk about that in a second, but that's an open question, fine. But I name this phenomena I see, and it could be unfree, and I'd still have something to name, a phenomena, this experience of making decisions. I don't need to go to physics to imply that there is a will. I see my own experiences that I call will, and I see behavior in other creatures, other agents, that looks like the category of, oh, that's willing, applies. So that's how I do that, because life implies that. Now, when we came up with classical physics a couple hundred years ago, now I myself have pretty much known modern physics as long as classical physics. I learned them when I was young, and I can't even remember the order because I was just kind of interested in that stuff. So I've been exposed to both my whole life is my point, but as far as I know. But there was a time when we just had the classical physics. I could see at that point thinking, free will might be an illusion like the sun moving across the sky. But I don't entirely abandon appearances until I have an explanation. When the fact that the earth moves and goes around the sun, that explains why the sun appears to move across the sky. So I can wait and see until we explain this appearance, right? The phenomena still has an appearance. If I might have interpreted wrong, it might have a common sense first order interpretation and that was wrong, or even a second and third or whatever, I've got it wrong, fine. Doesn't mean that the sun didn't really rise in the morning and it got light. It just means there was a different reason than I thought. Okay, So there's a different reason than I thought possibly for will. But it's not, that's not the state right now, right? It turns out that determinism was a little bit premature, and it's not deterministic. What looked deterministic was merely statistical samples filling in probabilistic distributions, which makes them predictable. Hello, probable. It makes them predictable. That doesn't make them deterministic. I'm sorry, I don't know why people get hooked, well, but I could figure it out, so there it's determinable. No, yeah, it's approximately determinable. And then some people go, yeah, it's approximately determinable. It's determinable. Look closely at the argument. I agree we could approximately determine just about anything that could be thought of. But you can't exactly do it. So there's no determinism, okay? It doesn't interfere with free will. And the reason to believe in free will is because of our daily experiences of it. That's why. We have all kinds of experiences. But what about in physics? Yeah, well, physics isn't so good at dealing with that yet. Now, what I believe in will is a lot different than what a lot of people think. A lot of people think, oh, the will is this, starting the actions of things. I don't believe that. See, there's a phenomena there, and that part, even though, a lot of people believe in will, and then, well, you're starting with assuming it's a certain way. No, I'm not. I have experiences of making decisions. I'm analyzing those and figuring out what's going on. Now, I do not think the will initiates actions in that sense, not the conscious will. You could call whatever is initiating the actions the will, but the conscious, reflective will that we often are thinking of, that's just a commenter. You see actions. So, for example, you see somebody bad-mouthing your mother. You visualize yourself picking up the bat and beating them. And then about that time, your consciousness kicks in and you're thinking, oh, yeah. And then your consciousness visualizes standing over the bloody, beaten body and how great it'll feel. Or else it visualizes sitting in a jail cell and how miserable that will feel. Or better yet, it imagines standing over the bloody body and how terrible that would actually feel. Like for someone like me, that would feel terrible. I go, oh, I don't really want, what have I done? I don't want to do that. Now, in my experience, what you visualize has an effect, okay? So you have to remember, I start epistemologically from perception. It seems like, well, we have perception. That's what defines existence. It's this phenomena of perceiving going on. That's where I did get the definition of I. I is the repository, the context for the perception. I don't say I'm receiving them. I don't. I don't say I'm creating them, because I don't know. I might be doing both. I don't say I'm the creator of the thought that I think. I might be the result of something else thinking. In fact, that's what I think, because, that's what I believe, because I believe we have brains that generate I. Comes from thinking. So it's more of the result than the initiator. But I define I as whatever this context that the perception is inside or around. Okay, and willing to me is the name for the fact that we do what I just call information processing on these perceptions. The fact that I can have these visualizations in reaction. I don't just have the visualization out of the blue. It's because this guy's pissed me off. I have one or the other. Or, yet another. And so, that's willing. The fact that I can visualize one or another, and which I visualize seems to have an effect on my behavior. So I don't think I'm the commander of an army. That's not my model of will. My model of a will is that I review things. I explain things, and then I try to visualize the future. And through these visualizations, I have an effect on the behavior of the body. I agree with those of you that if you're arguing that there's unfree will, that the will is unfree just because you want people to know how much their circumstances direct them, I know that. The metaphor for me is that it's like canoeing down a river, and mostly the power is in the river, not you. But you can paddle from one current to another, and I believe that holds. All right? You can visualize one thing or another. Maybe you can't visualize not getting mad, but you can visualize not being violent. And eventually maybe you can visualize not getting mad, and you can visualize, it's a tricky art form. But that's how I think it works. So I don't think it's a commander. My version of the will is not really, we're not talking about my version of the will. My version of the will is like, could I share it? Yes, I would like to share it. Maybe I will start with this